So we asked distributors in a number of interviews and through some survey work, how are you going to go to market? So what different types of sales organizations are you going to be using? And what we found is that despite the fact that your website might be less than 5% or 10% of your business, in the survey of distributors, the website is the one that is going to be growing. Not by tremendous amounts. So there's not going to be huge change, but the survey said that the sales organization, according to distributors, according to NAED members we surveyed, Salesforce is probably going to account for a 6% smaller amount of sales in the future. Inside sales about the same. The website's going to increase to 6.9% of I'm sorry, this isn't decrease. This is what percentage of your sales is it going to represent. So there's your answer, 6.9%. And counter is going to be down a little bit as well. So a relatively small survey, but what it says is that the sales organization is really not going to change dramatically, but what we are going to see is where the percentage of sales is probably going to all be not change dramatically, but the website's going to be the slight grower here at the expense of the other ways of going to market. Again, as they say, your results may vary, but this is what the census says, or the survey said. I put up this chart just because I thought it was interesting and it reflected some of the feedback from the distributors. This is from Forrester, and they looked at different types of salespeople. So imagine your sales organization today. They broke them into 4 types: order takers, explainers, navigators, and consultants. What they mean by this is order takers who are selling simple products into a simple purchasing situation. It's a straight rebuy, or they just need an extra box of something. Nothing to be explained, it's an order taker. An explainer is somebody who's working with a customer on the process. It's a relatively simple process, so they may be buying one thing, but it's a moderate to complex product, so the customer needs some explanation. So that and the salesperson capable of doing that or who mostly does that as an explainer. A navigator is the reverse. So that's somebody who's working in a complex buying situation. So imagine a big project. They're buying hundreds of different SKUs from you, but that there's nothing complex about those products. So mostly what a navigator does is works through your customer's organization, collects up all the blueprints, the purchase requirements, the specifications, takes it back to your business, navigates through all of your people and the suppliers to make sure that, the products aren't complex, but the buying process is complex. And then the consultants are the people that combine both. I'm selling complex products into a complex buying situation. So we've got some customer who is got a big deal, but it's a big deal with let's say they are doing a big factory automation job, and so they would require a consultant. And according to Forrester, if you're going to believe them, we already said on the previous chart that you think that your sales force isn't going to decline, but that the amount of sales going through your field salespeople might be a slightly less percentage than it was in the past. So what kind of salespeople are you likely to need in the future? And according to them is you're going to need more of the consultant types. You're going to need people who can go into moderate to big projects where they're complex buying situations. And a lot of what they're going to have to do is explain complex solutions, packages, combinations of hardware, software, even in services. And that's where they see if there's going to be more salespeople that are going to, as they say, survive, it's going to be these consultant types. And that kind of tracks with our survey of distributors earlier that said we expect, a lot, what was it, like 80% said we expect to sell either moderately or significantly higher percentage of complex products. And I've talked with a lot of distributors and they say, look, to the smaller contractor, the simple repurchase, I am moving to my website, I am moving maybe to inside sales, and I'm focusing my salespeople. The other thing I heard from talking with distributors individually is I'm finding it hard to get these consultants type salespeople. They're going to work for manufacturers, they're going into banking, they're going into sexier industries We heard millennials want to feel a purpose. I literally heard distributors tell me, it's hard to sell a kid these days on the fact that you're going to change the world by working for an electrical distributor. And the pushback was, well, you got to reframe what it is that an electrical distributor does, because we do change the world. We just never thought we had to tell people that, our own salespeople that. And now we do. And so literally, by doing that, not only do you attract millennials, but hopefully you will attract millennials who either are or can be consultative type salespeople selling these more complex products that you, or the people we interviewed, told us are coming down the pike or are already here. So a bit of this is there's a consensus on what's happening. So I probably just summarized this now, but so for buying behavior, it is a bit cloudy. As I said, there's kind of a lack of consensus, and from everybody we talked to and the data we looked at in terms of, is it more or fewer salespeople? Is it the same or less? But there is kind of this sneaking suspicion that we may need fewer or be able to, we may need about the same or fewer salespeople, but they're going to need more consultative skills in either account management, selling solutions, et cetera. We might need slightly more inside salespeople for the commodity, either inside salespeople or beef up our websites from where they are today to deal with smaller contractors, to free up our salespeople's time to do this more complex selling. So, there's a little bit of a consensus around what we need to do because of buying behavior. Very quickly, because I think I'm getting close to my time here. I should say we want to leave time for Q&A, so that's why I'm watching the clock. Compensation. So this was something that came up in our midpoint discussion, which is, well, that's really interesting what we're saying about where the sales force is going. What's the implication of this for compensation? So this isn't, I guess it's both a factor that drives the future sales model, or it's an implication of the scenarios we're going to talk about. First, I looked at an older NAED survey, so this isn't my data from NAED. So it's a couple years old, but I don't know that it's changed dramatically, and distributors, not surprisingly, have a salary and commission structure for their salespeople, the big blue thing on the left, or a commission and a draw, but it's basically some fixed component and a commission on top of that. When we ask people what is the commission, or when the survey asked people what is the commission based on, it's some variable of gross margin. And that's, that's very common, not only in electrical, plumbing, technology. That's the common model that's been in distribution for decades, right? So no surprise there. So then we tried to project into the future, what are the implications of that pie chart we just talked about based on everything that we've been learning on all these other factors. And so both from talking with distributors, looking in our crystal ball, looking at other clients we have in other industries, we kind of saw 4 different things cropping up. We just said in the previous section that because of the increasing complexity of what you're going to sell, you may need to think about how compensation is going to change as your sales people need to start selling more and more solutions and complex products. So you might have commission kickers. So you might have a higher commission rate for someone that is selling, smart factory, smart building type solutions, Internet of Things solutions, to motivate those people, B, to attract those consultative salespeople who are capable of it, and C, to send a signal to everyone else, this is what we value. So you might think of ways that you can both attract, retain, and motivate people to sell solutions. Services. So we talked about that a lot of these complex products are often wrapped with services around them. So we looked at other industries that have a high service component, other distribution businesses, particularly in the technology industry, that have a high services component, and looked at their compensation programs. And what they do is services tend to be often recurring type services. So you can sign customers up and they pay a certain amount per month for, say, a monitoring service. And so distributors who offer those services actually have a recurring monthly commission that declines over time for services. So you get, the distributor salesperson gets a certain percentage of that monthly fee, but that oftentimes that declines because the big hit is for selling the contract in the first place. There's also another bigger hit if you resell the contract for the next year. So compensating for services is tricky because it's not they sell something and get a commission for it. And you want them to sell the service contract, and you want them to continue the service contract. So it's a little bit of pain over time is the wrinkle there. There's also different compensation depending on the type of service that's sold. If you're selling some sort of basic, warranty or maintenance service, that's a lower commission rate than if you're selling some sort of professional service or value-added service, like an optimization or monitoring type of contract. The third one at the bottom, not surprisingly, is compensation for millennials. The big thing here I mentioned before is millennials are very worried people. They grew up in a very difficult time. And I'm sorry to keep saying they, because I recognize some of you in the room are probably millennials, but a lot of student debt. And one of the things we're seeing, not only in electrical, but really across all types of distribution businesses, is where distributors are moving a little bit more to the fixed variable ratio is changing, with a little bit more fixed and a little bit less variable, because millennials are nervous. They're like, I got to pay off this student debt. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. I want to make sure that I've got the money to do this. The other thing is that we're seeing that the structure of the variable pay is such that it tends to be more skewed. So as you're trying to say, look, you can progress, and if you do progress and you sell above a level, it's actually a sliding scale that's tilted more on the upside. So it's a higher fixed base, but of the variable you do make, you've got a bigger upside. The other thing we're seeing for millennials in terms of compensation is it's not all about hard compensation. You've also got a lot of the soft benefits. So this may sound soft and squishy and everything, but just a lot more feedback. You're doing a good job, or I would have done that different, but more, I don't want to say constant feedback, but more frequent feedback. So whether you call that compensation or not, I would say it's still a reward, but so you might come up with, some people are doing, they call it gamification. So you would come up with like contests, who can sell the most of this product in a short period of time, and you make it kind of a game. Even an app, for example, is one way of doing more immediate feedback, but just personal feedback as well. Telling them more frequently how you're doing. So that sounds like trivializing millennials, but that is this idea of more constant feedback is part of that. The last one we heard about is, let's see, it's going to take a little bit of explanation here, but almost everybody compensates their sales force based on some formula of gross margin. But if you look at your business software or ERP software, whether you have Eclipse or whoever you're using, a lot of that software now is becoming easier to figure out some level of net margin. So what's on individual deals? So what was the holding cost of inventory? In other words, did you sell something that came out of stock, or did you sell something that we could drop ship for the manufacturer? If we did drop ship it, was there a penalty charge from the manufacturer, or was there no penalty charge? Did the customer pay on time? So we are seeing, it's only a small number so far, but there is the potential for distributors to say, I don't care what the gross margin is. I don't live on gross margin. I live on net margin. And so if we can say, I'm going to pay you based on not only what you sell, but how you structure the deal. And look, I don't want you to sell something that is always going to be sitting in stock for a year versus selling something that I can turn very rapidly. So we think that in the future you're going to see a sales force that is going to think more about not only the gross margin of what they sell, but the terms of the deal and the type of products that make up that selling, so that they're driving more net margin. And in the past, the data wasn't really available. The software couldn't tell you deal by deal what's my net margin. Now, it's not literally the net margin after depreciation, but it's some intermediate measure of gross margin minus certain expenses I can measure. So I think that's kind of an interesting twist on compensation.